so moved and delighted with the power of these speeches and the commitment that you're hearing tonight. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much for being on our board and for your leadership. Our last speaker tonight is a very, very good friend who has come to several of our events. He came to the G20 in Toronto 4 years ago. We had spoke to 3,000 people. There were scalping tickets outside. It was an absolutely wonderful evening. John came again to our AGM in Nanaimo 2 years ago. We keep in very close touch because we're fighting these trade agreements across the pond. John Hilary is executive director of an organization called War on Want. He lives in the United Kingdom. He has worked in the global justice movement for the past 25 years and has published widely on issues of globalization, trade policy, and worker rights. He was one of the first external columnists to be invited to contribute to The Guardian's Comment is Free website when it was launched in 2006. I think you have a lot of Guardian fans in this room. And John, yes, and John has written regularly for this and many other publications since. His report on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, that's TTIP. Now this is the big agreement that is now being negotiated between Europe and the United States, which has suddenly made many European allies conscious of CETA. In a way, we're almost grateful TTIP has come along because we were going, yoo-hoo over here. And Europeans were saying, oh, you're just Canada, and you're also friendly, and you don't have any big bad corporations. I guess they haven't heard about our mining companies. So we have a story to tell there. But so John's written a report on TTIP. Published by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in February of 2014. It's been translated into 5 European languages, I think more than that now, more than that. In 2013, John was appointed honorary professor in the School of Politics and International Relations at the University of Nottingham. His new book is called The Poverty of Capitalism, Economic Meltdown and the Struggle for What Comes Next. It was published by Pluto Press, and it is available out here, and you're not going to have John to sign it if you don't get him to sign it tonight or this weekend. Please welcome our good friend John Hilary.
Thank you so much, Morden, and really it's an absolute privilege to be here. I'd like to start again by thanking Chief Haverhill for the very warm welcome on behalf of Six Nations. I hope that when you next come back to England, with your daughter or without your daughter, you'll come and visit us in turn. You'll be very welcome there. Also a huge thank you to the Council of Canadians. It's a real privilege to be here, as I say, and Maud's referred to the other times I've come over to this side of the Atlantic and been part of your incredible movement-building meetings. And it really is so amazing to me because I go back every single time, not just inspired, not fired up with a real sense of purpose, but also having learned so much from all the strategies and all of the things that you've put in place. And I know that the next couple of days I'm going to go back with exactly the same spirit of learning and really taking from the things that you always bring together. The spirit of the Council of Canadians is something which we really, really, really want to reproduce on the UK side of the Atlantic, and I'm really, really grateful for you. For those of you who don't know, War on Want, the organisation which I'm currently the director of, it's been around for a bit. I mean, since 1951 it was founded, and it came out of the labour movement. So again, I'm very proud to be able to share the platform with representatives, leaders of the labour movement here in Canada. And we share a lot of the principles, the philosophy of the Council of Canadians. The idea that we're fighting power, and that the issue at the heart of everything we do is about power. There are lots of organisations, charities, aid agencies in Britain which deal with the symptoms. And you know, we've got a lot of those symptoms. For the first time ever, we've got food banks in Britain, where people are going to food banks. We've never had those before. And some of the charities will be saying, well, we need to set up more food banks and start giving out more money to the people who need the money and start giving out food to the people who need the food. Well, surely we've got past that. Surely the time now is to ask the question, why, in the affluent, the rich societies that we live in, should we be contemplating the idea of giving people out food because they have none at home? How is it that we should be just going back to the old Victorian ideas of charity, philanthropy, aid, rather than talking about social justice and challenging power head on? And that's the thing which we share with the Council of Canada. And the other bit which really makes me so happy to be here on the sort of international wing of the forging solidarity, forging international solidarity, is that idea that it's politics as well. For us, all poverty is political. It's brought about by politics, it's brought about by the political decisions of the elites. They can be government elites, or they can be corporate elites. But, and this is the really positive, powerful part which I want to try and address a little bit in what I have to say, those decisions are challenged by political action from the base. Organised political action, organised in the trade unions, organised in the other environmental movements, in all of the social movements that we partner with in our country and around the world. It's political action which brings change, and that's what also brings hope. And that politics, I think, we share again with the Council of Canadians. Not a partisan politics, although we do know certain groups who we find it difficult to be partisan with, but a politics of change which comes from below and challenges all political parties to do the right thing. And in a way it's nice to be in Canada as a British person, because there are a lot of things that we have in common. I'm not just talking about the fact that your $20 bill seems to have a face on it, which I recognise from some of our money as well. Well, she doesn't look the same on British money as she does on your money. We need to do something about it. And I'm not even talking about the weather, although I really would like to say, when I arrived in Hamilton last night, and there was this fine drizzle, and a little bit of a cold spell in the air, I just thought, that's nice. It felt very comforting. I don't know why. It's something very deep inside us. But the real thing which I suppose unites us at the present moment is that we're all struggling in our different ways against Conservative governments which we didn't want there to be in the first place, and we don't want to be there for very long, and we both, in Britain and in Canada, have the opportunity to throw them out next year, because we've got a general election as well. They bring your one forward, as I hear people are suggesting they might do, from its October fixed point. If it comes forward to May the 7th, you can have it on exactly the same day as ours, and that'll be quite a nice double whammy to get rid of them. And the programmes of the Conservative governments on both sides of the Atlantic are not, by any coincidence, the same. We know that they have been taking lessons from each other. We know that we've sent government officials over here to learn from the Harper government, and that Canadian government officials have also travelled over to Britain. And it's this downward spiral, this race to the bottom, which they try and learn from each other. And that's not just in some of the ways we've heard already. The antisocial ways, the antisocial programme at the heart of these governments, forcing millions of people into poverty when there's never been any need for them to be in poverty before. We've just heard from the Conservative government in Britain boasting at their national conference in this past week that they will freeze all benefits for people of a working age for the next 2 years, tightening the screw on those who need that help most. Why? Just so they can give yet another tax break for the 1%. Absolutely unthinkable. Shame indeed. Unthinkable that they can put that out on the eve of an election and think that it's going to win them votes. And we were together at the 2010 G20 when we took to the streets of Toronto to challenge the G20. They had only just used billions and billions and billions of our money to bail out the banks for the financial crisis that they've caused. But within 6 months, the Harper government, the Conservative government from the UK was saying, that's enough of the public bailout. We've managed to restart the system. in favour of capital, in favour of the banks, and now comes the pain. And guess who's going to be paying for it? It's not going to be the banks who caused the crisis, it's going to be everybody else who had no part in it at all. And they managed to give that message so strongly that within 6 months of us all knowing why the crisis had come about, as a crisis of capitalism, we were being told it was a crisis of overspending. And somehow the public sector workers were responsible for it. And that's when you started seeing, yes, another 20,000, another 50,000, hundreds of thousands of public sector workers being laid off in Britain alone, simply because they'd managed to shift the message and turned it into an austerity program which was going to become permanent. And that's what we're now seeing. This wasn't a quick fix. We've heard Naomi Klein mentioned. She's one of your compatriots. I'm also proud to say she's one of our patrons at War on Want. And in her previous book, The Shock Doctrine, it was exactly this. You wait for these moments of crisis and you turn them to the advantage of the long-term program that capitalists had in place since the 1970s to reduce government, to put the pressure down on working people. And that, again, the programs that we're seeing, they're not just antisocial, they're anti-labour. Just as Harper, on this side of the Atlantic, boasts about having the tightest anti-union laws, so our government in the UK are boasting that they've got the tightest anti-union laws in Europe. And what's the consequence of that? There are over 5 million working people in Britain who are not able to earn enough to put food on the tables of their families and keep a roof over their heads. 5 million people who are not paid a living wage. And that's a scandal in a country where you've seen the chief executives get a 14% pay rise just in the last year alone. And it's exactly that type of absurd social re-engineering that we're trying to fight against. The environmental side, which John just talked about and Ben showed so eloquently, I thought, before, the slides that you showed of the tar sands here, they are completely unimaginable to us. We live on a tiny island. The land mass of Britain is, I think, about a quarter of the land mass of Ontario province. And our population is 65 million. It's almost double the population of the whole of Canada, actually. I think it felt a little bit like when we were on Vancouver Island. That was about the same size as Britain, and with all of the 60 million people crammed into that. So for us, this new drive for fracking, which I know we share, is rather different. Because we haven't got these vast expanses where people can go and start, digging and prospecting and ripping apart the environment. So what have they done? They've just passed a new legislation, let's say they're going to pass new legislation, which makes it permissible for the energy companies to drill for shale gas, to do the fracking under the homes of British citizens without their consent. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. They did. They put it out to public consultation. They put it out to public consultation. What do you think about this? You don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner in probability theory to know what people say. 99% of people came straight back and said, no, this sounds good. And then it turned out, it hasn't finished, I'm afraid, it turned out that it wasn't actually a consultation, it was a test. Because even though 99% of people came back and said, under no circumstances, the government said that was actually the wrong answer. The wrong answer was, the right answer was yes. And they're going to start with this process coming through as of now. And that's the sort of thing that with a complete disregard for any sense of a post-carbon future, disregard for any of the democracy or any of the other things we hold dear. So anti-social, anti-labour, anti-environment, and then the other thing which unites, I'm afraid, our governments is this profound imperialist agenda. And it's been mentioned a little bit already, but this profound imperialist agenda which brought Stephen Harper over just last month to the NATO summit in South Wales. I was there as part of the counter-summit saying we do not want any more NATO, we do not want this constant race for war, this constant rearmament, we want peace in the world. And it was extraordinary, it was just extraordinary to hear the warmongering, the beating of the war drums in relation to Russia and Ukraine. I mean, what do we want? Another Cold War? Was the last one so great? You know, this sense in which we're trying once again to take up the cultures of war in the Middle East. And I know you on Monday have the federal votes in this country in terms of going to war with the IS, the Islamic State, which we had in Britain, and it went through Parliament very, very swiftly just a couple of weeks ago. And I'm not standing here with any brief to defend the horrors that are going on in Iraq and Syria. But surely we've learned that it's precisely as a result of NATO's operations around the world that we get these blowback time and again. In 2005, 9 years ago, the CIA had already brought out a document saying, we will get the same blowback from Iraq that we saw from arming the Mujahideen against the Soviets in Afghanistan. And sure enough, we are now reaping the whirlwind for that. And I know one of the things which is more difficult in Canada than it is with us is the whole situation around Israel and Palestine as well, which for us in Britain is such a key issue in this entire imperialist adventure. We had 150,000 people out on the streets of London to protest against the latest Israeli attack on Gaza. Boycott, divestment, sanctions movement trying to bring Israel back in line with international law is growing so strongly in Europe, and we would love it if in the spirit of forging solidarity we could also call out to the Canadian movements to be part of that. And if anybody wants to say more about that, I'm here for the next 2 days. But it is about building resistance, and we've built, as War on Want with a lot of other groups on the left, have built the People's Assembly Against Austerity, which is a national movement from all different groups, all taking part in a very horizontal structure, and with the trade unions, with the environmental groups, all at local chapter level. We had the first meeting of that last summer. 4,500 people turned up, which was amazing for just a meeting you held. Over 100 local chapters have now been formed, and that's going on, and it's becoming a real force. And we've got on the 18th of this month a massive demonstration planned in London between the People's Assembly, but led by the trade unions, led by the TUCR Trade Union Congress, saying Britain needs a pay rise. We will not put up with the low cost, low wage, low rights Labour policy of this government. But what's so funny for me is that the minute you start getting this type of resistance, what does the government do? They introduce another law, and the law is a gagging law. This thing which they've introduced called the Lobbying Act, which makes it almost impossible for any of us to run campaigns in the year leading up to a general election, i.e. now. You know, so they've said you've all got to register, the penalties under which you have to do this are so severe you'll actually find yourself unable to do anything at all. You'd be glad to know that War on Want, along with many, many other groups, are refusing to register, and if they want to come and get us, they'll have to find us. The other fight which we have in common between the European Union as a whole and Canada, Maud already talked about and others have mentioned, is CETA, the EU-Canada trade deal, the comprehensive economic and trade agreement that we were told was concluded last week. Don't believe it, it hasn't finished. And I do feel rather guilty about this because a few years ago, people from the Council and people from other members of the trade justice movement here in Canada came to us and said, this is the next big thing, join us in our fight. And we were recovering from the onslaught of austerity, and people were focused so much on trying to fight back in the national space that it wasn't easy to try to build a movement. And again, yes, you do have to thank the US government a little bit for this, for coming along with CETA Mark II, NAFTA on steroids as they're calling it. Basically the most extraordinary threat we've ever seen in Europe, and that has drawn in the movement to fight against CETA on its tailcoats. Because we see these massive agreements as the biggest transfer of power, again power, from society to transnational capital that we have seen in a generation. And we fought off their efforts to do that last time around. Many of us were part of that same movement back in the 1990s, which fought off the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, the MAI. They tried to put exactly the same things through there. A concerted international global movement fought back against that, and we won. And in 1998, it fell off the table and it's never come back. They tried to insert the same powers through the WTO just 2 years later. And again, we rose up. We had so many battles within the WTO and outside on the streets, and we brought it down. So that by 2004, those new issues of investment, government procurement, competition policy, all the things that you'll find in CETA were wiped off the table. And again, this was a massive victory. They've come back on the bilateral route now, tried to slip it through in CETA, in TTIP, the EU-US one. And let's be absolutely clear, this is NAFTA plus. It is WTO plus. If you thought you'd had a hard time under NAFTA, wait for this one. And we've had studies which have been done for the British government by the London School of Economics. And they've said we've looked at the sort of pain that Canada has faced as a result of the investor-state challenges under NAFTA Chapter 11. We in Europe can expect far more expensive, and on a far greater range of issues than they've ever even seen in Canada. Health, or the stuff we've already seen. You've heard about the nuclear challenge in Germany. Germany decided that they were going to phase out nuclear power from the year 2022. And they're now being sued by a Swedish company, Vattenfall, for 3.7 billion euros. As a result of having taken that national decision. That was in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the implosion of that nuclear power plant, in the second ever nuclear disaster to reach that top level 7 disaster, same as Chernobyl was. And the German people came out on the streets, they said, we do not want nuclear power. And the German government said, we hear you, we are going to phase out nuclear power. Now they're being sued by a Swedish company which feels that they're not going to be able to profit enough in the future from that. And that's exactly what we're going to get through CETA. It's exactly what we're going to get through the parallel EU-US trade treaty as well. Private corporations being able to sue the governments in secret courts, which aren't even really courts. There's no judges in them. It's just 3 corporate lawyers who are allowed to pronounce on what they think the damages should be for these corporations. You can't really, when we put this out to people in the public meetings that we do, they're absolutely shocked. The government procurement rules, which again Maud was talking about earlier, this means that you will no longer be able to put any requirements on companies coming in and doing deals with the government locally or at the municipal level or indeed at the provincial level. And that's not just about the discrimination they talk about. It's not because you're treating European companies in a different way to Canadian companies. It's saying you can't put any conditions on these companies at all. They get the power, they get the free rein to invest and to operate exactly as they will. And again, it means that we lose any control over that foreign investment. We lose any ability to make it work for people, for local communities, for our own historical development. Public services, absolutely under attack. I was really happy to get the Save Canada Post badge when we were outside just earlier. And again, it's fascinating. Canada Post is still in public hands, but it's decided it's not going to be doing any of the posting anymore. Well, for us, it's the other way around. We've still got it, delivering letters. It's just it's being privatised more and more, and that's the next wave. Basically, it's either given out to the private sector, or else the public sector is not going to be allowed to deliver it anymore. And similarly, these other new powers being given over to big corporations through this regulatory cooperation forum. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the workshops in the next couple of days, but it basically means that these big corporations get to sit on new intergovernmental bodies, vetting any rules and regulations and standards that you might want to introduce in the future, because they will have first call as to whether or not those are the sorts of regulations that our countries should be putting through. Democracy? Democracy completely goes.
Fascism!
It is fascism. It completely goes. But I just wanted to make my final comments in relation to how we fight back. And I think partly we need to move beyond just resistance. Again and again we find ourselves running to catch up. We're fighting fires wherever they break out. When we've defeated one of these, it comes up again. When we've defeated that, it comes up again in another form. And I think this, for me, Paul mentioned the experience of the Bolivian resistance in Cochabamba when they fought off Bechtel, which Oscar Oliveira was involved in, and also other leaders like Pablo Solon, who